Hey, fourth graders. All right, so Artemis Fowl. We are right in the middle of chapter 8, which is called Troll. And I stopped there on Tuesday, which for me is today. For you, it was maybe yesterday, because it was a good place to stop since the next little bit is going to be fighting. And yeah, so if you remember, Cudgeon had taken over, and his big plan is to release a troll into Foul Manor in the hopes that Artemis and Butler and whoever else is in there will yell for help and basically asking the fairies to come in, and then they can go in and then they can get Holly out. But of course, if the troll runs into Holly, then Holly might be dead. And essentially, this is not a very well thought out plan, but it is what it is. By the way, you guys like my not being a teacher, or not in class, so I get to wear 1980s cartoon T-shirts. Nice, classy, right? Okay. Anyway, Butler took the stairs 4 at a time. So when we last saw Butler, we only saw him briefly. We actually didn't really see him at all, but Holly saw him run past her yelling, "Juliet!" And now we're kind of rewinding time to see why he was doing that. So Butler took the stairs 4 at a time. It was possibly the first time he had ever abandoned Master Artemis in a time of crisis. But Juliet was family, and there was obviously something seriously wrong with his baby sister. That fairy had said something to her, and now she was just sitting in the cell, giggling. Butler feared the worst. If anything were to happen to Juliet, he didn't know how he'd live with himself. He felt a dribble of sweat slide down the crown of his shaven head. The whole situation was shooting off in bizarre directions. Fairies, magic, and now a hostage loose in the manor. How could he be expected to control things? It took a 4-man team to guard the lowliest politician, but he was expected to contain this impossible situation on his own. Butler sprinted down the corridor into what had, until recently, been Captain Short's cell. Juliet was sprawled on the cot, enraptured by a concrete wall. "What are you doing?" he gasped, drawing the Sig Sauer 9mm with practiced ease. His sister barely spared him a glance. "Quiet, you big ape! Louis the Love Machine is on. He ain't so tough. I could take him." Butler blinked. She was talking gibberish, obviously drugged. "Let's go. Artemis wants us upstairs in the Situation Room." Juliet pointed a manicured finger at the wall. "Artemis can wait. This is for the Intercontinental title, and it's a grudge match. Louis ate the Hogman's pet piggy." The manservant studied the wall. It was definitely blank. He didn't have time for this. So if you recall, we've gotten kind of a couple of hints over the course of this book that Juliet really likes professional wrestling. These are obviously made-up professional wrestlers, but she thinks that she's watching a wrestling match because that's what Holly told her was on the wall when she mesmered her. And so Juliet thinks that she's watching this grudge match for the Intercontinental title, which is the heavyweight title is kind of the big one. The Intercontinental title is sort of like a second down title. It's still a title, but it's not as good as the heavyweight title. Anyway. So he studied the wall. It was definitely blank. He didn't have time for this. "Right, let's go," he growled, slinging his sister over his broad shoulder. "No, you big bully," she protested, hammering his back with tiny fists. "Not now! Hogman! Hogman!" Butler ignored the objections, settling into a looping run. Who the heck was this Hogman person? One of her boyfriends, no doubt. He was going to keep closer tabs on the callers to the lodge in the future. "Butler, pick up." It was Artemis on the handheld. Butler jiggled his sister up a foot so he could reach his belt. "Lollipops," barked his employer. Say again? I thought you said... get out of there. Take cover. Take cover. Take cover, the military term didn't sound right coming out of Master Artemis's mouth. Like a diamond ring in a lucky bag. Take cover? "Yes, Butler, cover. I thought speaking in primal terms would be the quickest route to your cognitive functions. Obviously, I was mistaken." So basically, he said, I thought that speaking in a dumb way would be the best way to get it through to your brain rather than me speaking with big words like I normally do. That was more like it. Butler scanned the hall for a nook to duck into. Not much choice. The only shelter was provided by the suits of medieval armor puncturing the walls. The manservant ducked into the alcove behind the 14th century knight, complete with lance and mace. Juliet tapped the breastplate. You think you're mean? I could take you with one hand. Quiet, hissed Butler. He held his breath and listened. Something was approaching the main door, something big. Butler leaned out far enough to get one eye on the lobby. Then you could say that the doorway exploded. But that particular verb doesn't quite do the action justice. Rather, it shattered into infinitesimal pieces. Butler had seen something like this once before when a Force 7 earthquake had ripped through a Colombian drug lord's estate seconds before he had been scheduled to blow it up. This was slightly different. More localized, very professional. It was classic anti-terrorist tactics. Hit them with smoke and sonics, then go in while the targets were disoriented. Whatever was coming, it would be bad. He was certain of it. And he was absolutely right. Dust clouds settled slowly, depositing a pale sheet on the tungsten rug. Madame Fowl would have been furious if she ever put so much as a toe outside of the attic door. Butler's instincts told him to move, zigzag across the ground floor, make for the higher ground, stay low to minimize the target. This would be the perfect time to do it before visibility cleared. Any second now, a hail of bullets would be whistling through the archway, and the last place he wanted to be was pinned down on a lower level. And on any other day, Butler would have moved. He would have been halfway up that stairway before his brain had time for second thoughts. But today, he had his baby sister over his shoulder, spouting gibberish, and the last thing he wanted to do was expose her to murderous assault fire. With Juliet in the state she was in, she'd probably challenge the fairy commandos to a tag wrestling match. And though his sister talked tough, she was just a kid, really. No match for trained military personnel. So Butler hunkered down, propped Juliet against a tapestry behind a suit of armor, and checked his safety catch. Off. Good. Come and get me, fairy boys. Something moved in the dust haze. It was immediately obvious to Butler that something wasn't human. The manservant had been on too many safaris not to recognize an animal when he saw it. He studied the creature's gait, possibly simian. So gait is like the way it walks, and simian means ape. Similar upper body structure to an ape, but bigger than any primate Butler had ever seen. If it was an ape, then his handgun wasn't going to be of much use. You could put 5 rounds into the skull of a bull ape, and he'd still have time to eat you before his brain realized he was dead. But it wasn't an ape. Apes didn't have night eyes. This creature did. Glowing crimson pupils, halfway hidden behind shaggy forelocks. Tusks, too, but not elephantine. These were curved with serrated edges, gutting weapons. Butler felt a tingle low in his stomach. He'd had this feeling once before, on his first day at the Swiss Academy. It was fear. The creature stepped clear of the dust haze. Butler gasped. Again, his first since the Academy. This was like no adversary he'd ever faced before. The manservant realized instantly what the fairies had done. They had sent in a primal hunter, a creature with no interest in magic or rules, a thing that would simply kill anything in its way, regardless of species. This was the perfect predator. That much was clear from the meat ripping points on its teeth, from the dried gore crusted beneath its claws, and from the distilled hatred spilling from its eyes. The troll shambled forward, squinting through the chandelier light. Yellowed claws scraped along the marble tiling, throwing up sparks in their wake. It was sniffing now, snorting curious breaths, head cocked to one side. Butler had seen that pose before, on the snouts of starved pit bulls just before their Russian handlers set them loose on a bear hunt. The shaggy head froze, its snout pointed directly at Butler's hiding place. It was no coincidence. The manservant peeked out between the chainmail fingers of a gauntlet. Now came the stalk. Once the scent had been acquired, the predator would attempt a slow, silent approach before the lightning strike. But apparently the troll didn't read the predator's handbook, because it didn't bother with the stealth approach, jumping directly to the lightning strike. Moving faster than Butler could have believed possible, the troll sprang across the lobby, brushing the medieval armor aside as though it were a shop mannequin. Juliet blinked. "Oh," she gasped. "It's Bigfoot Bob, Canadian champion 1998. I thought you were in the Andes looking for your relatives." Butler didn't bother to correct her. His sister wasn't lucid. At least she would die happy. While his brain was contemplating this morbid observation, Butler's gun hand was coming up. He squeezed the trigger as rapidly as the Sig Sauer's mechanism would allow. 2 in the chest, 3 between the eyes. That was the plan. He got the chest shots in, but the troll interfered before Butler could complete the formation. The interference took the form of a scything tusk that ducked below Butler's guard. They coiled around his trunk, slicing through his Kevlar-reinforced jacket like a razor through rice paper. Butler felt a cold pain as the serrated ivory pierced his chest. He knew immediately that the wound was fatal. His breath came hard. That was a lung gone, and gouts of blood were matting the troll's fur. His blood. No one could lose that amount and live. Nevertheless, the pain was instantly replaced by a curious euphoria. So euphoria is feeling like really, really good. Some form of natural anesthetic injected through the channels of the beast's tusks. More dangerous than the deadliest poison. In minutes, Butler would not only stop struggling, but go giggling to his grave. The manservant fought against the narcotics in his system, struggling furiously in the troll's grip. But it was no use. His fight was over almost before it had begun. The troll grunted, flipping the limp human body over his head. Butler's burly frame collided with the wall at a speed human bones were never meant to withstand. The bricks cracked from floor to ceiling. Butler's spine went too, so he broke his back. Now, even if the blood loss didn't kill him, the paralysis would. Juliet was still enthralled by the mesmer. "Come on, brother. Get off the canvas. We all know you're faking." The troll paused, some basic curiosity piqued by the lack of fear. He would have suspected a trick if he could have formulated such a complicated thought. But in the end, appetite won out. This creature smelled fresh and tender. Flesh from above ground was different, laced with surface smells. Once you had open-air meat, it was hard to go back. The troll ran a tongue over his incisors and reached out a shaggy hand. So that's where there's a little bit of a break. Under normal circumstances in class, that probably is where I would have stopped. It's 12 minutes, so it would have made a lot of sense to stop there. So you end with Butler has been stabbed through the chest, poisoned with a thing that makes him feel really good, so he's not as worried about being stabbed through the chest, and also been thrown against a wall and had his back broken. And then Juliet speaks up, and now the troll is reaching out to get at the basically drugged, mesmered Juliet. So it makes for a good cliffhanger, right? But you guys are online today, so we won't do that. Instead, I'll just keep reading. All right. Holly tucked the hummingbirds close to her torso, dropping into a controlled dive. She skimmed the banister, emerging onto the porticio below a stained glass dome. The time stop light filtered unnaturally, splitting into thick azure shafts. Light, thought Holly. The helmet high beams worked before. There was no reason why they wouldn't work again. It was too late for the male. He was a bag of broken bones. But the female, she still had a few seconds left before the troll split her open. Holly spiraled down through the faux light, searching her helmet console for the Sonic's button. Sonic's was generally used on canines, but in this case it might provide a moment's distraction, enough to get her to ground level. So Sonic's, this is spelled S-O-N-I-X, but basically Sonic is sound, so she's looking for a button she can hit that's going to make a really loud noise. The troll was reaching toward Juliet underhand. It was a move generally reserved for the defenseless. The claws would curl in below the ribs, rupturing the heart. Minimum damage to the flesh and no last-minute tension to toughen the meat. Holly activated her sonics, and nothing happened. Not good. Generally, your average troll would be, at the very least, irritated by the ultra-high-frequency tone. But this particular beast didn't even shake his head. There were a couple of possibilities. One, the helmet was malfunctioning. Two, this troll was deaf as the proverbial post. Unfortunately, Holly had no way of knowing, as the tones were inaudible to fairy ears. So it's a button Basically, it's like a dog whistle. So she hits this thing, and it emits a really high-pitched whistle tone sort of a thing that only the troll could hear. She can't hear it, so it doesn't bug her. Whatever the problem, it forced Holly to adopt a strategy she would rather not have resorted to: direct contact. All to save a human's life. She'd gone Section 8 without a doubt. Holly jerked the throttle straight from fourth to reverse. Not very good for the gears. She'd get a dressing down from the mechanics for that, in the unlikely event she actually survived this never-ending nightmare. The effect of this gear crunching was to flip her around in midair so that her boot heels were pointed directly at the troll's head. Holly winced. 2 entanglements with the same troll. Unbelievable. Her heels caught the beast square in the crown of its head. At that speed, there was at least half a ton of G-force behind the contact. Only the reinforced ribbing in her suit prevented Holly's leg bones from shattering. Even so, she heard her knee pop. The pain clawed its way to her forehead, ruined her recovery maneuver too. Instead of repelling herself to a safe altitude, Holly crumpled onto the troll's back, becoming instantly entangled in its ropey fur. So she was planning on, she's flying down, she flips around so that her feet are pointed at the troll. She's going to hit the troll, and then her plan is to fly away, but she hits and hurts herself, and it's like, ugh, and kind of collapses onto the troll, and then she sort of seems to get stuck in its fur. The troll was suitably annoyed. Not only had something distracted it from dinner, but now that something was nestled in its fur, along with the cleaner slugs. The beast straightened, reaching a clawed hand over its own shoulder. The curved nails raked Holly's helmet, scoring parallel grooves in the alloy. Juliet was safe for the moment, but Holly had taken her place on the endangered individuals list. The troll squeezed tighter, somehow securing a grip on the helmet's anti-friction coating, which, according to Foley, was impossible to grip. Serious words would be had, if not in this life, then definitely the next. Captain Short found herself being hoisted aloft to face her old enemy. Holly struggled to concentrate through the pain and confusion. Her leg was swinging like a pendulum, and the troll's breath was breaking over her face in rancid waves. There had been a plan, hadn't there? Surely she didn't fly down here just to curl up and die. There must have been a strategy. All those years in the academy must have taught her something. Whatever her plan had been, it floated just out of reach, somewhere between the pain and the shock. Out of reach. The lights, Holly, a voice in her head, probably talking to herself. An out-of-head experience? She must remember to tell Foley about this. Foley? Hit the lights, Holly. If those tusks get to work, you'll be dead before the magic can kick in. Foley, is that you? Holly must have said this aloud, or she may have just thought it. She wasn't sure. The tunnel high beams, Captain. A different voice, not so cuddly. Hit the button now. That's an order. Sorry, that was rude. I should have used my rude voice. The tunnel high beams, Captain. A different voice, not so cuddly. Hit the button now. That's an order. Oops, that was rude. She was falling down on the job again. First Hamburg, then Martina Franca, now this. Yes, sir, she mumbled, trying to sound professional. Press it, now, Captain Short. Holly looked the troll straight in its merciless eyes and pressed the button. Very melodramatic. Or it would have been if lights had worked. Unfortunately for Holly, in her haste, she'd grabbed one of the helmets cannibalized by Artemis Fowl. Hence, no sonics, no filters, and no tunnel beams. The halogen bulbs were still installed, but the wires had come loose during Artemis's investigation. Oh dear, breathed Holly. Oh dear, barked Root. What's that supposed to mean? The beams are offline, explained Foley. Oh, Root's voice trailed off. What more was there to say? Holly squinted at the troll. If you didn't know trolls were dumb animals, you'd swear the beast was grinning. Standing there with blood dripping from various chest wounds, grinning. Captain Short didn't like being grinned at. Laugh this off, she said, and butted the troll with the only weapon available to her, her helmeted head. Valiant, undoubtedly, but about as effective as trying to cut down a tree with a feather. Luckily, the ill-advised blow had a side effect. For a split second, 2 strands of conductor filaments connected, sending power flooding to one of the tunnel beams. 400 watts of white light blasted through the troll's crimson eyes, dispatching lightning rods of agony to the brain. mumbled Holly in the second before the troll convulsed involuntarily. Its spasm sent her spinning across the paraquet floor, legs jittering along behind her. So her leg is basically broken, or her knee is dislocated, something like that. So her leg is flopping really awkwardly. One of her legs is. The wall was approaching at an alarming speed. Maybe, thought Holly hopefully, this will be one of those impacts where you don't feel any pain until later. No, replied her pessimistic side, afraid not. She slammed into a Norman narrative tapestry, bringing it tumbling down on top of her. Pain was immediate and overwhelming. Oof, grunted Foley. I felt that. Visuals are shot. Pain sensors went right off the scale. Your lungs are busted, Captain. We're going to lose you for a while, but don't worry, Holly. Your magic should be kicking in already. Holly felt the blue tingle of magic scurrying to her various injuries. Thank the gods for acorns. But it was too little too late. The pain was way beyond her threshold. Just before unconsciousness claimed her, Holly's hand flopped from beneath the tapestry. It landed on Butler's arm, touching the bare skin. Amazingly, the human wasn't dead. A dogged pulse forced the blood through smashed limbs. Heal, thought Holly, and the magic scurried down her fingers. The troll faced a dilemma. Which female to eat first? Choices. This decision was not made any easier by the lingering agony buzzing around its shaggy head, or the cluster of bullets lodged in its fatty chest tissue. Eventually, it settled on the surface dweller, soft human meat, no dense fairy muscle to chew through. The beast squatted low, tilting the girl's chin with one yellowed talon. A pulsing jugular looped lazily down the length of her neck. So this is jugular is going down your neck. And it's a vein, and so your blood is pumping through it. So he can see just the little movement of the blood through the veins. The heart or the neck? The troll wondered. The neck. It was closer. It turned the talons sideways so the edge pressed against the soft human flesh. One sharp swipe and the girl's own heartbeat would drive the blood from her body. Butler woke up, which was a surprise in itself. He knew immediately that he was alive because of the searing pain permeating every cubic centimeter of his body. This was not good. Alive he may have been, but considering the fact that his neck had gone 180 degree or had a 180 degree twist on it, he'd never so much as walk the dog again, not to mention rescue his sister. The manservant twiddled his fingers. It hurt a lot, but at least there was movement. It was amazing that he had any motor functions at all, considering the trauma his spinal column had suffered. His toes seemed all right too, but that could have been phantom response, given that he couldn't actually see them. The bleeding from his chest wound appeared to have stopped, and he was thinking straight. All in all, he was in much better shape than he had any right to be. What in heaven's name was going on here? Butler noticed something. There were blue sparks dancing along his torso. He must have been hallucinating, creating the pleasant images to distract himself from the inevitable. A very realistic hallucination, it must be said. The sparks congregated at trauma points, sinking into the skin. Butler shuddered. This was no hallucination. Something extraordinary was happening here. Magical. Magic. That rang a bell in his recently reassembled cranium. Fairy magic. Something was healing his wounds. He twisted his head, wincing at the grate of sliding vertebrae. So his head is turned around backwards, or close to it anyway, and he kind of turns, and you can hear the bones in his neck like rubbing because they're weird, because they're all messed up. There was a hand resting on his forearm. Sparks flowed from the slim elfin fingers, intuitively targeting bruises, breaks, and ruptures. There were a lot of injuries to be dealt with, but the tiny sparks handled it all quickly and effectively, like an army of mystical beavers repairing storm damage. Butler could actually feel his bones knitting and the blood retreating from semi-congealed scabs. His head twisted involuntarily as his vertebrae slid into their niches, and strength returned in a rush as magic produced 3 liters of blood lost through his chest wound. Reproduced 3 liters of blood lost through his chest wound. Butler jumped to his feet. Actually jumped. He was himself again. No, it was more than that. He was as strong as he had ever been. Strong enough to have another crack at that beast hunkered over his baby sister. He felt his rejuvenated heart speed up like the stroke of an outboard motor. Calm, Butler told himself. Passion is the enemy of efficiency. But calm or no, the situation was desperate. The beast had already effectively killed him once, and this time he didn't have his gun. His own skills aside, it would have been nice to have a weapon, something with a bit of weight on it. His boot clinked on a metallic object. Butler glanced down at the debris strewn in the troll's wake. Perfect. There was nothing but snow on the view screen. Come on, urged Root. Hurry up! Fully elbowed past his superior. Maybe if you didn't insist on blocking all the circuit boards. Root shuffled out of the way grudgingly. In his mind, it was the circuit board's fault for being behind him. The centaur's head disappeared into an access panel. Anything? Anything? Nothing, just interference. Root slapped the screen. Not a good idea. First, because there was not one chance in a million it could actually help. And second, because the plasma screens grow extremely hot after prolonged use. Darn it! Oh, don't touch that screen, by the way. Oh, ha ha ha. We have time for jokes now, do we? No, actually. Anything? The snow settled into recognizable shapes. There it is. Hold it there. We got a signal. I've activated the secondary camera. Plain old video, I'm afraid, but it'll have to do. Root didn't comment. He was watching the screen. This must be a movie. This couldn't be real life. So what's going on there? What's going on in there? Anything interesting? Root tried to answer, but his soldier's vocabulary just didn't have the superlatives. What? What is it? The commander made an attempt. It's the human. I've never... Oh, forget it, Foley. You just have to see this for yourself. Holly watched the entire episode through a gap in the tapestry folds. If she hadn't seen it, she wouldn't have believed it. In fact, it wasn't until she'd reviewed the video for her report that she was certain the whole thing wasn't a hallucination brought on by a near-death experience. As it was, the video sequence became something of a legend, initially doing the rounds on amateur home movies, cable shows, and ending up on the LEP Academy hand-to-hand curriculum. So basically, this video is going to be used at the police academy for the fairies as like a training video kind of thing. The human, Butler, was strapping on a medieval suit of armor. Incredibly, as it seemed, he apparently intended to going toe-to-toe with the troll. Holly tried to warn him, tried to make some sound, but the magic hadn't yet reinflated her crushed lungs. Butler closed the visor, hefting a vicious mace. Now, he grunted through the grill, I'll show you what happens when someone lays a hand on my sister. The human twirled the mace as though it were a cheerleader's baton, ramming it home between the troll's shoulder blades. A blow like that, while not fatal, certainly distracted the troll from its intended victim. Butler planted his foot just above the creature's haunches and tugged the weapon free. It relinquished its grip with a sickly sucking sound. He skipped backwards, settling into a defensive stance. The troll rounded on him, all 10 talons sliding out to their full extent. Drops of venom glistened from the tip of each tusk. Playtime was over. But there would be no lightning strike this time. The beast was wary. It had been hurt. This latest attacker would be afforded the same respect as another male of the troll species. As far as the troll was concerned, his territory had been encroached on, and there was only one way of solving a dispute of this nature, the same way trolls solved every dispute. I must warn you, said Butler, straight-faced. I am armed and prepared to use deadly force if necessary. Holly would have groaned if she could. Banter? The human was trying to engage a troll in macho repertoire? So basically Butler's like teasing the troll, and Holly's like, what are you doing? Don't talk to it. It doesn't understand you. Then Captain Short realized her mistake. The words weren't important. It was the tone he employed. Calm, soothing, like a trainer with a spooked unicorn. Step away from the female. Easy now. The troll ballooned its cheeks and howled. Scare tactics, testing the waters. Butler didn't flinch. Yeah, real scary. Now just back out of the door and I won't have to cut you into little pieces. The troll snorted, miffed by this reaction. Generally, his roar sent whatever creature was facing it scurrying down the tunnel. One step at a time, nice and slow. Easy there, big fellow. You could almost see it in the troll's eye, a flicker of uncertainty. Maybe this human was. And that was when Butler struck. He danced under the tusks, hammering home a devastating uppercut. with his medieval weapon. The troll staggered backward, talons flailing wildly, but it was too late. Butler had stepped out of reach, scooting across to the other side of the corridor. The troll lumbered after him, spitting dislodged teeth from pulped gums. Butler... okay, so basically Butler's got a mace, so it's a long pole with a maybe spiked or maybe just a ball at the end. But the troll is kind of like, this guy seems like he's not scared of me. And right then, Butler kind of moves in and swings up underneath the troll's like talons and stuff and hits it right in the jaw and just kind of like smashes its head back. So it spits out its teeth, but it's still on its feet. Butler sank to his knees, sliding and turning the polished floor, bearing him like an ice skater. So he's running, moving away from it, and he kind of slides across the floor and spins and turns as he does so. He ducked and pirouetted, facing his pursuer. "Guess what I found," he said, raising the pistol. No chest shots this time. Butler laid in the rest of the automatic clip in a 10-centimeter diameter between the troll's eyes. Unfortunately for Butler, due to millennia spent headbutting each other, trolls have developed a thick ridge of bone covering their brows, so his textbook spread failed to penetrate the skull, in spite of the Teflon-coated load. So he shoots the troll right in the forehead a whole bunch of times, but its bone is too thick, so it doesn't go through. However, 10 Devastator slugs can't be ignored by any creature on the planet, and the troll was no exception. The bullets beat a sledgehammer tattoo on its cranium, causing instant concussion. The animal staggered backwards, slapping at its own forehead. Butler was after it in a heartbeat, spinning one shaggy foot beneath the... pinning one shaggy foot beneath the mace spikes. So this one does have spikes on it. So he slams the spikes down through its foot and pins it to the floor. The troll was concussed, blinded by blood, and lame. A normal person would have felt a shard of remorse, but not Butler. He'd seen too many men gored. That means like taking either being bit and losing lots of blood and guts and stuff, or just being stabbed through by the tusk or the teeth or claws of something. Too many men gored by injured animals. Now was the dangerous time. It was no time for mercy. It was time to terminate with extreme prejudice. Holly could only watch helplessly as the human took careful aim and delivered a series of crippling blows to the stricken creature. First, he took out the tendons, bringing the troll to its knees. Then, he abandoned the mace and went to work with the gauntleted hands, perhaps deadlier than the mace had been. The unfortunate troll fought back pathetically, even managing to land a few glancing blows, but they failed to penetrate the antique armor. Meanwhile, Butler toiled like a surgeon, working on the assumption that the troll and human physiques were basically the same. He rained blow after blow on the dumb creature, reducing it to a heap of quivering fur in so many seconds. So Butler first is hitting it with the mace, and he's hitting it in like the backs of the knees and that sort of thing. So he's slowly but surely crippling it, and then he just drops the mace and just starts punching it over and over and over again in all the places that would really hurt a human. And he's assuming that it'll probably work on a troll, and probably some of them don't, but enough of them do that it doesn't matter. It was pitiful to watch, and the manservant wasn't finished yet. He stripped off the bloodied gauntlets, loading a fresh clip into the handgun. "Let's see how much bone you have under your chin." "No," gasped Holly with the first breath in her body. "Don't." Butler ignored her, jamming the barrel beneath the troll's jaw. "Don't do it. You owe me." Butler paused. Juliet was alive, it was true. Confused, certainly, but alive. He thumbed the hammer on his pistol. Every brain cell in his head screamed for him to pull the trigger. But Juliet was alive. "You owe me, human." Butler sighed. He'd regret this later. "Very well, Captain. The beast lives to fight another day. Lucky for him, I'm in a good mood." Holly made a noise. It was somewhere between a whimper and a chuckle. "Now let's get rid of our hairy friend." Butler rolled the unconscious troll onto an armored trolley, dragging it to the devastated doorway. With a huge heave, he jettisoned the lot into the suspended night. "And don't come back," he shouted. "Amazing," said Root. "Tell me about it," agreed Foley. And that is the end of chapter 8. So Butler is still alive, and he just kicked troll butt. And Holly is also still alive. She saved Butler. And Juliet is probably still thinking she's watching wrestling somehow, but she's also not dead. And Artemis got punched in the face, but he's also okay. And the troll is now back outside and no longer in any condition to hurt people. So chapter 9 is going to be called Ace in the Hole. However, that will be for another day. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you guys are having a great Wednesday. And I will see you, well, either online or I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one. Bye.